Imagine the world's biggest game of keep away, but instead of a ball, the prize is the future of technology. The US stepped onto the field swinging, building a digital wall so high it could practically scrape the clouds. The goal? Stop China from getting its hands on the ultra-sophisticated machines needed to make the world's fastest computer chips. Bold move, right? Everyone thought America had just played a checkmate. Then came the plot twist. A confidential report quietly handed to Congress dropped like a tech sector nuke. In just 1 year after the sanctions kicked in, Chinese firms legally purchased $38 billion worth of the same banned chip-making equipment. Yep, legally. No smugglers, no shady backrooms, no hidden crates. That's almost 40% of global sales for the top equipment manufacturers. A colossal backfire. The US hadn't shut China out. It had accidentally kicked off a global gold rush. Instead of slowing Beijing down, Washington's blockade stuffed China's tech industry with fresh fuel and cash. The moral? In a world this connected, you can't build a wall high enough to stop money and innovation from finding a detour. So how exactly did $38 billion worth of gear waltz through America's Iron Curtain? The answer is so simple it's almost funny: a paperwork delay. When the US rolled out its export ban, its two biggest allies, Japan and the Netherlands, home to chip giants like Tokyo Electron and ASML, hit snooze on writing their own rules. That 1-year lag created what can only be described as a legal freeway. While American firms sat in compliance purgatory, Chinese chipmakers simply took a shopping trip next door. It was all above board, not a single law broken. The US had slammed one lane of a 3-lane highway, but the traffic just swerved into the other two and sped right past. That's the brutal math of globalization. No country, not even the mighty US, can play solo and expect to win. Meanwhile, China's factories roared on full throttle. But here's the real sting. Washington's smart sanctions ended up punching its own companies in the gut. Giants like Applied Materials and Lam Research were forced to cut off their biggest customers overnight. Chinese clients who made up massive chunks of their revenue. The fallout? Hundreds of millions in losses, creeping toward $1 billion, gone in a flash. Imagine being told, either obey your government and watch your profits vanish, or bend the rules and risk financial ruin. That's not just bad business, that's a slow bleed of innovation itself. The cash that once funded America's next generation of breakthroughs is now flowing into European and Japanese pockets. In its rush to trip up China, the US ended up slipping on its own banana peel. The allies it relied on quietly raced ahead, filling Chinese orders and cashing in. It was a financial plot twist worthy of Wall Street irony. The US policy meant to protect its tech edge instead handed the lead to others. And what about China's progress? Is it real or just built on borrowed toys? Well, a bit of both. That $38 billion worth of Western and Japanese hardware gave China's chipmakers a huge shortcut. Suddenly, firms like SMIC were cranking out 7-nanometer smartphone processors, chips thought to be years out of reach. It was a shock move that made the world blink. But here's the catch: you can buy machines, not mastery. China knows this, which is why it's pouring billions into training engineers, reverse engineering imported gear, and building homegrown replacements. Companies like Nora are sprinting to design their own versions, transforming foreign tools into temporary scaffolding for a self-sustaining future. While America's policies floundered, Beijing's message was simple: we'll take your tools, thank you, but soon we won't need them. The US, bruised but not beaten, hit the panic button. This time, the target wasn't chips. It was China's telecom empire. Enter the FCC's all-out assault on Huawei and ZTE. A sweeping crackdown meant to exile them from the US market and convince allies to do the same. Officially, it was about national security. Unofficially, a desperate power move to regain control in a race that had already gone sideways. If the chip ban was a failed attempt to block China's offense, this telecom crackdown was an effort to blow up its defense, the global networks it helped build. By trying to choke off Huawei and ZTE, Washington hoped to cut the cables connecting China's influence worldwide. But the move reeked of desperation, an admission that the old playbook had crashed and burned. What began as a trade spat was now a full-blown tech war, reshaping alliances, industries, and the very flow of information itself. The world's biggest economies weren't just trading barbs anymore, they were redrawing the future of technology. One failed keep-away game at a time. It was no longer just about semiconductors. It was about splitting the very foundation of the digital world. The US drew a hard line in the Silicon sand, telling its allies in no uncertain terms, "You're either with us or with Huawei." That ultimatum set off a global chain reaction. Nations that once shared a unified digital marketplace suddenly found themselves choosing sides. The world began to fracture into two distinct tech spheres, one orbiting around Washington, the other gravitating toward Beijing. And just like that, we stepped into the age of the splinternet. This wasn't a policy tweak. It was the start of a digital divorce, one that would shape everything from the phone in your pocket to the fiber lines powering entire economies. That $38 billion tech leak? It was the first domino to fall, and the ripples are now shaking every corner of the global tech landscape. First came the loss of credibility. When U.S. export controls collapsed so publicly, allies started to doubt America's ability to enforce its own rules. Then came the second blow, China's growing independence. With every new chip factory and high-tech assembly line, China became less dependent on Western supply chains. But the real game changer was subtler, what analysts call secondary leverage. For decades, America's control of cutting-edge tech gave it diplomatic weight far beyond economics. Now, as China builds its own ecosystem, that influence is slipping away. Nations tied to Chinese manufacturing aren't as eager to take sides in Washington's disputes. This wasn't just a transfer of technology, it was a transfer of power. While the US was busy building walls, Asia was busy writing a new rulebook for the 21st century. With more than 2 billion people and the fastest growing middle class on Earth, the region has become too valuable for anyone to ignore. Countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and India have figured out the game. They're welcoming Chinese investments with one hand while shaking hands with the West with the other. A diplomatic juggling act that's paying off big time. China's Belt and Road Initiative, once focused on roads and ports, has morphed into a digital Silk Road, exporting not just tech infrastructure but entire digital ecosystems to developing nations. And these nations? They're not pledging loyalty to Washington or Beijing. They're choosing practicality, building hybrid systems that combine American, Chinese, and local technologies. The new rule is simple: use whatever works best. So what happens when the world's digital playground gets split down the middle? We're about to find out. The US-China tech war is forcing every country to pick a team. Not over apps or gadgets, but over the very systems that keep modern life running. Imagine two separate digital worlds, different 5G networks, incompatible cloud systems, and rival artificial intelligence platforms. In one country, your phone connects seamlessly. In another, it's practically a brick. Businesses will have to duplicate everything. Two supply chains, two infrastructures, two versions of reality. Economists say this divide could eventually shave 2% off the entire global economy. And after all the sanctions, the losses, and the finger-pointing, who actually wins? Ironically, not the superpowers. The real victors are the smart middle players. Countries like Vietnam, India, and Saudi Arabia, who are taking investments from both sides and turning the tech war into their own gold rush. For smaller nations, though, the dilemma is brutal. Pick a side and lose access to half the world's technology, or walk the tightrope and risk falling between two giants. The truth is, the age of absolute dominance is over. The 21st century won't belong to a single empire of silicon, but to many competing power centers. The question is no longer who wins the tech war, but who learns to thrive in a world permanently divided by it.